All right, everybody, welcome to Friday's edition of the Established the Run NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer alongside Mike Gallagher. We'll be breaking down the injuries on this 10-game slate, and this is the first slate of the year, Mike, that this show feels like what we anticipated this show being. We have some big questionable tags on the injury report. We'll talk through what the different kind of scenarios are, what our leans are on some of those injury report tags as well. So where do you want to start, Mike? 10 games, a lot of options to talk about, some big names to talk about as well.
Yeah, we got back-to-backs, so we'll integrate that throughout. But, I mean, we got to start with the big dog. We got to start with Joel Embiid. He's questionable. Had a huge wrap on his leg. Not good. This is the same right knee that he hurt last year. We were all freaking out about. He returned. It was okay. That's bad. So I still think he plays. But, I mean, if he doesn't play, you're obviously playing Tobias. Maxi's really sick. So we know Simmons isn't playing. But yeah, he's the big one on the slate for sure.
Yeah, and if he doesn't play, it also probably impacts some of the Brooklyn players' projections as well, just because you start to get into a situation where you have to take some minutes off the ceiling of guys like Harden and KD, just because the game environment would probably be less competitive. The Sixers were able to hold their own kind of without Embiid a little bit more last year, but that's in large part to having Simmons. And without Embiid and Simmons, the depth on this roster starts to become pretty shaky. So if Embiid does sit, I would expect that Tobias Harris would become a popular play. Maxey would remain a really popular play. And then in terms of the front court, how do you think we've seen in the past them split up a lot of things, but this year they've got Andre Drummond back there. Do you think we go back to the Andre Drummond of yesteryear in terms of DFS stardom?
Yeah, I haven't seen his price yet, but I imagine he's going to be pretty good. Paul Reed, I think, is cheap. I saw him on there. He would be a guy. He's not necessarily a lock because they do want to play Georgia Shang at the 5, which they played in the preseason too. So, but yeah, Drummond, there's no reason to think that he wouldn't be a really, really good play if Embiid doesn't go out there. And obviously Tobias would be no-brainer. Furkan Korkmaz played the backup too in the opener too. He had a couple assists, ran the offense. Doc was really impressed with how he's been playing as a ball handler. Some more usage for him. So it would just open up so many avenues for guys.
All right. So that's a good quick look at kind of the Embiid situation. Let's take a look at another star that would have been like a first round, second round kind of caliber pick who's also questionable on the injury report tonight. Bradley Beal got banged up in that first game. He's questionable tonight. What do you think the odds? I think so. I'll actually go back to this on Embiid as well. What do you think? If you had to lean on odds of these guys playing for both Beal and Embiid, what do you think the percentages are tonight?
I still think Embiid plays. So it's just I think they're being careful. It's not a back-to-back. If it was a back-to-back, I'd drop it. But I think 60% he plays, which is still 40% is a pretty big number.
Yeah.
And I feel pretty confident. I feel pretty confident on Beal. I'd say like 85%. He had a fall. Okay. He was kind of. I saw what happened. Like he fell into the basket. He was down for a solid 15 seconds. Got up, looked okay. So. Just a precautionary questionable. I should be all right.
Yeah, so if Beal wasn't to play, I think from a usage perspective, you'd see guys like Dinwiddie and Kyle Kuzma be able to pick up the slack there. But from a playing time perspective, how do you think the minutes would shake out for Washington if Beal wasn't unable to go?
Yeah, so I actually have to change the depth chart because Aaron Holiday was Beal's backup and Raul Neto was Spencer Dinwiddie's backup. So I would see either way we'd see a lot of Raul Neto. We'd probably see KCP slide up as well. Probably start there. Open up minutes for Denny Avdia. They really like to put Cody Kispert as well because we still have no Roy Hachimura, so they're going to probably need to keep Kuzma at the 4 spot, which they will slide him up at times to free up Bertans. So those guys being Avdia, Bertans, KCP, Neto would all benefit. I wouldn't expect Holiday to get much of a bump. I think they like him in the second unit there.
All right. On this huge 10-game slate, those are the biggest names that I think, like first round type talent, second round type talent in season long drafts, high priced 9K plus guys. Who are some of the other big questionables that you're keeping an eye on?
So we got Darius Garland. I'm going to pull up their depth chart because their depth chart's real ugly if he doesn't play. He had an ankle sprain. He returned. He looked fine. I think he's going to play, but back to back. So what I would normally think is a 75% is maybe more of a 65% that he doesn't play. Let me pull this up really quick. Just want to show you guys. Whoops, that's not right. This depth chart here. It's ugly, man. And I was helping Josh do the minutes on this. and they just have no guard depth. Like
Yeah.
they have you take Garland out, they're probably starting Rubio. Bickerstaff said he really liked Rubio in the second unit is kind of an advantage in that spot. But I mean, just look at who they're going to start. Kevin Pangos, we know they started Sexton, but I think they would start Rubio. They would still bring Okoro off the bench and kind of use him as a kind of a combo guard, filling in with Sexton sliding over. So Okoro's minutes would go up. They'd have to probably play Lamar Stevens and or Dean Wade as a 4 and just play really, really big. And also, I have to shift Laurie Marketing over here too. But yeah, Laurie Marketing's minutes would go up. But again, I think he plays.
I think
ankle sprain looked pretty minor to me.
I think the two starting options would either be Rubio or Okoro. Because I think you could slide Sexton to the 1, keep Rubio in kind of that backup combo guard role, and then have Okoro there. And I think they'd be okay with that. But I think those would be the two guys that would be the potential starters there. I think they would like to get away from Pangos, Nembhard. Like those guys aren't NBA ready. So I think you'd see, the guys picking up minutes as you alluded to, some of the bigger guys, and maybe Denzel Valentine picks up some minutes as well because he can do some ball handling in a pinch. But we talked about this kind of in the preseason during our normal podcast, Established Runs NBA podcast feed. They just don't have much in the way of backcourt depth. They are a very top heavy roster, and one of the reasons that we're kind of down on the Cavs this year as a whole is the roster just isn't built to kind of get through the whole season. And these guard injuries are kind of the big thing. So you could see a spot where Rubio emerges as a value tonight. I think it would be very dependent on starting lineup. I think he's more likely to start than Okoro or anyone else. But I do think just because they're so thin at point guard, they could do some things where they just keep him off the bench immediately and kind of, move their way through the rotation that way.
Yeah, like it's so much cleaner if it comes off the bench. Like that's what I was trying to think through last night when I was helping with projections. It's just easier. So we'll see. Either way, the minutes are going to be there. They pretty much are playing them kind of starters minutes anyways. So that's most of the big tags. Do you want to hit some maybe back-to-back stuff real quick?
Well, let's hit
we can tie it into
Let's hit some of these smaller tags. We know that Josh Hart is going to be out for New Orleans. New Orleans is really interesting to me tonight because they're a team that played really, really tight first half rotations. Nickeil Alexander-Walker played 18 first half minutes. Brandon Ingram played 20 first half minutes in the game against Philadelphia. And those guys lost a rotation late in the game because of a blowout. Jonas Valanciunas, who, his minutes might have been more elevated for the matchup against Embiid, but he was on, 31, 32, 33 minute pace as well. He was always kind of restricted to like 28, 29 in Memphis. And so some of these situations with New Orleans where they're thinner on the roster now, no Zion Williamson, obviously, but also now no Josh Hart. That's 2 of their top 6, really. And I think they've got enough depth that they can kind of piece it together. So I don't think it necessarily makes any one like value play stand out. But I do think the absence of his minutes, the absence of his rebounding rate does help guys like Valanciunas and Brandon Ingram and Nickeil Alexander-Walker to a lesser extent from a DFS perspective tonight.
Yep, and they started Trey Murphy in the second half. I'm so mad. One of the beat writers shot a shoot around, and you know me, I'm obsessed with starters jerseys, and they didn't. I couldn't see anybody else's jerseys, so I was so tilted. But
the things that I just wanted to note about their rotation from the first game that were surprising to me is Najee Marshall was not in the rotation until Hart got hurt. Mm-hmm. We had thought he might even start. So it just goes to show, sometimes you get into the regular season and these teams are still trying to figure out what they were doing in the preseason and whatnot. So I think it's going to be an interesting spot to see whether they go back to Trey Murphy, whether Najee Marshall takes that spot. But Kira Lewis was in the rotation, right from the get-go. And so they were playing Satoransky more as a combo 2 guard than more as a primary backup 1. So I think it was kind of interesting to see those guys. And I think those guys all will play a few more minutes tonight, but I don't think anyone is DFS relevant because I think, maybe in a pinch if they really let Trey Murphy go, but I just don't think they will. I think they have enough depth with Temple and Satoransky and Kira Lewis and Najee Marshall to spread those kind of backup minutes around.
Yeah, I'm actually tweaking it right now because Hart started at basically the 4. It shifted everybody down. Satoransky shifted down, Temple shifted down. So it kind of worked that way. So we'll see if they could kind of go back. It makes so much sense to start Marshall and basically put him in the hard spot. But either way, I saw Murphy's cheap on DraftKings. So if
it's a big slate. There's a lot of value early in the season, and even when he started in the second half and played more in the second half, he was still on kind of a modest minutes pace. It wasn't a really big minutes pace, and I think for someone like him, you might need a bigger minutes pace, especially early in the season when pricing is a little bit looser on the whole. The other situation from like a secondary small injury situations to tackle is once again Indiana. They've got Torrey Craig, Justin Holiday, and Jeremy Lamb, all questionable on the injury report. They're already without Karis LeVert, Keelan Martin, and TJ Warren, who've already been ruled out. That is 6 wings that are on the injury report. So obviously there's a cascading issue here with depth. What are your expectations for Indiana tonight? Will we see Torrey Craig and Justin Holiday and Jeremy Lamb? And if we don't see any combinations of them, are we going to get another big performance from Chris Duarte?
Yeah, so the 2 big notes from these guys are, 1, they were in an 8-man rotation,
which is insane.
Oh my god! And 2, it's important to note that Justin Holiday and Lamb are being listed with the same injuries, so they didn't get hurt again, I don't think.
Yeah,
but back to back. So I think Lamb's thing is bothering him, man. Like I don't know if I'm like imagining it, but he looked to be just like grimacing. So I could see Lamb sitting, which would certainly open up. They'd have to go bigger. They'd have to put O'Shea Brissett in there. I think Holiday should play, or maybe since tomorrow. Maybe it's a 1-and-1 situation where one sits, one doesn't tomorrow. But yeah, I think one might sit. We're not going to project them out, but yeah, Duarte's going to be looking at big minutes. We saw the McConnell, Brogdon, I think 60 minutes overlap for them, so they'll both be playing a bunch. Brogdon was insane in the opener. Gets a really good matchup too. We'll talk about that in the DFS show, I'm sure. But yeah, I don't think they would crack O'Shea Jackson. I'm sorry. O'Shea Jackson's Ice Cube, but Isaiah Jackson, the Ice Cube front court, as I like to call it. But yeah, Craig not playing would thin him out. Then we definitely would see O'Shea, but he wouldn't really be a play.
Yeah, and one thing to note, like if you're kind of taking the first game as gospel for what they did with their rotations, as Mike noted, they are on the front end of a back-to-back here. It's very unusual to play 8-man rotations generally in the NBA unless you are really, really down to the screws in terms of who's available. And Rick Carlisle is a veteran coach. He's not a coach that is somebody who's like kind of trying to get as many wins as early as he can. That's not really his style. So I do kind of think they'll go back to a 9-man tonight on the front end of the back-to-back. But obviously the health of these 3 players will ultimately determine that, because as you can see on the depth chart here, they just do not have wings. 2s and 3s. You've got LeVert out. You've got Keelan Martin out, you've got TJ Warren out, and then you've got 3 of the other guys questionable. So there's one healthy body that normally plays, which is Duarte. So if they are really thin again, you're probably going to see a ton of Duarte minutes. You're probably going to see a lot of Brogdon sliding to the 2 with more TJ McConnell and Wanamaker playing. You're probably going to see O'Shea Brissett slide down to the 3 to try to steal minutes there. So there's going to be a lot of ways that they're going to be trying to facilitate filling those minutes if there's a cascade of multiple guys out. I'm with Mike. I think it's less likely that we get more than 1 out. I think 1 out could be a thing where they might rest 1 tonight, rest the other tomorrow type thing, or see how the guys get through tonight. And it does sound like Lamb, who has the biggest injury history of these 3 guys, is the most questionable of the 3.
Yeah, Lamb strikes me as a guy who could just really linger, man. Like I could see Lamb eventually get missing multiple weeks or something for this wrist thing. Like to have a wrist injury week 1. We saw Cat. He's never the same.
He's had wrist issues before. He's had knee issues. I mean, he's had everything. You can play the operation game on Jeremy Lamb, unfortunately, because he's a very talented player that has had a lot of different injuries. Let's go to the Celtics, where Josh Richardson was a surprise scratch the first game of the season. Al Horford, returning to conditioning from COVID, is listed as questionable. Horford's absence really opened up a big opportunity and big role for Robert Williams. The Time Lord played 34 minutes in regulation. We all know that with his fantasy point per minute production, anytime you can get Time Lord up near 30 minutes, it is just a monstrous projection in terms of what you're doing. He played 34 in regulation. What is your take on Horford's availability tonight, and how do you think Richardson's return to the rotation impacts things for the Celtics?
Yeah, so it would thin out a couple guys. Romeo Langford in particular would be a guy that I think gets cut down a little bit just with the way that rotations were shaking out in the preseason before the injuries happened. But yeah, I think Grant Williams is okay. So just to tie in Al Horford really quick, he was listed with protocols in the first game, didn't play, obviously, and then he's listed as reconditioning, and then Ime Udoka. And I could just listening to coaches over and over again, I could kind of sense how comfortable they are about whether guys are going to play. But generally, I felt like it was kind of a lean out to me. So Grant Williams was really good in the first game, just all around for just how they went around their offense. Even ran some offense through him. He was pretty good on Randall for the most part. So he would be looking at a pretty good opportunity here in a matchup against a team like this, the Raptors, that I think could exploit. But yeah, getting Richardson in the mix, I think Pritchard got very little overlap with Smart, which I was really surprised about. But yeah, Schroeder got a lot of extended run late in the game too, so he would be cut down. So mostly those, and Neesmith wouldn't be quite as attractive, but I think he's just going to be a backup to one of the wings anyways.
Yeah, looking around at the remainder of the injury report, the only other spot that I kind of wanted to touch on before we get out of here is in Sacramento with Mo Harkless listed as questionable. It's an interesting thing for Sacramento because one, they had unusual rotations in the preseason that we talked about with respect to specifically the center position, and Rashawn Holmes, Tristan Thompson, and Alex Len all playing in the first half of all their preseason games. They kicked Alex Len to the curb opening night in terms of rotation, which I think is the right thing to do, but was difficult to project based on the preseason usage and some of the comments and concerns around Rashawn Holmes' conditioning. No question marks for that after game one. But without Marvin Bagley in the rotation early in the season as well, if Mo Harkless was to sit, things do start to get a little bit tighter on the wings. They have basically solved this issue by just playing these 3-guard lineups with, Fox, Mitchell, Halliburton, Hield, 3 of those 4, or Terrence Davis, 3 of those 5, I guess. Do you expect that anything with Harkless is like, if Harkless is unavailable tonight, do you think that change is anything with regards to Bagley, or do you think it's still the small lineups that we're dealing with?
I think Bagley would play, but Harkless's injury is very similar to Beal's. I thought Harkless was a little bit worse for how he fell. Like, he looked like he was like a chalk drawing of a guy who died with the way he was like laying down. But yeah, so I still think he plays though. It doesn't need a lot of minutes anyways. So I think he would play, but I think Bagley would enter, probably come off the bench, fill some minutes there to cut down. Not a lot, but a little bit of Terrence Davis. Walton loves Davis. He said he was one of the best shooters on the team, which struck me yesterday. But just to add some notes I wanted to just share with everybody, if you listen to 3-ball, Walton wants Harry Barnes to shoot it 8 times from 3. 8. Harrison Barnes. So that was really cool. And Davion, he said he trusts Davion on offense. He ran Davion without Fox and Halliburton, which is interesting. So a lot of really, this is one of the most fascinating rotations to me that I've been paying attention to. And yeah, Harkless going away, which I'm not expecting, would open up much up. So they're okay going really small.
Yeah. One other questionable name that I did not touch on, Terry Rozier. There are quotes from him or the team that came out that basically said he is 98% to play tonight. So it sounds like Terry Rozier will return. They were another team that had a surprising rotation in the first game. We saw Mason Plumlee play a ton. PJ Washington's minutes were way down. Bridges played a ton. I'm really interested to see how they handle this front court, because it was very different than the way that they were playing towards the end of last season. It was against a big Indiana opponent. They get another big Cleveland opponent tonight, which Cleveland, by the way, in their first game, despite playing 3, supposed bigs in the front court, they only grabbed 39% of rebounds available in that first game against Memphis. So if you're not winning on the boards with Jared Allen and Mobley and Markkanen all starting, I don't know how you win basketball games if you can't dominate the boards with that length. You're going to have to get really, really hot from 3. But with that being said, Rozier's return to the rotation, how do you think it impacts things tonight? He is listed as questionable, but all comments seem to point to him returning tonight.
Yeah, so we pretty much cut out Cody Martin and Jalen McDaniels, basically splitting that last rotation spot. We saw Bouknight didn't play in the first game. A little bit of Ish Smith overlap in the last game. That'll probably go away. And then it's also really important to note that James Borrego, us analysts, we love to be like, what the hell, coach? Why aren't you playing your guy more often? And we love to play that game. But Borrego said, hey, I screwed up. I didn't play LaMelo enough minutes. So LaMelo's minutes should come up. I'd love him today. I hope so. The thing that I will say about this, though, is
this is not the first time Borrego has done this with LaMelo's minutes. It was kind of a consistent problem, honestly, last year, where you'd have these nights where you just like look in the box score and Melo's like tracking for 27, 28, and you're like, what's going on here? Like it doesn't make sense. And for that to happen in a game without Rozier is like shocking to me. So I appreciate the accountability and the acknowledgement from James Borrego, but I'd actually like to see a more consistent 33, 34, 35 ceiling from LaMelo. It seems like we only get that on occasions, but fantastic matchup tonight for LaMelo, certainly. And he had incredible rates all preseason, big spike in usage rate, big spike in assist rate, and a lot of those things held in the first game. So really, really excited for LaMelo this year as a whole. I would just like to see his coach be more consistent in putting him on the floor.
Yeah, he had 93 touches in 29 minutes, which is just insane. How many times he touched the ball. So definitely, I'll be maybe flag planting LaMelo later today.
One other injury situation I just want to touch on again. Orlando is really thin again. This is like the grossest situation you can ask for when you've got a really bad team that's a really thin team going up against a really good or historically a very good defense. The Knicks did not play good defense in their first game, and I question whether their offseason additions will impact them on the defensive end. But Orlando is once again without Michael Carter-Williams, Markelle Fultz, Jonathan Isaac. Those guys are out for a long time. Chuma Okeke might return to contact and practice like next week, but he's out for a while. And then Etuan Moore and Gary Harris are out again. So it's another situation where there's a lot of minutes and opportunity available because there's not a lot of healthy bodies. Like you look through that depth charts list, you can count them off. Jalen Suggs, Cole Anthony, RJ Hampton, Terrence Ross, right? That's 4 players that they have available to play the 1 through 3. So then you get Franz Wagner kind of as a 3, right? So that's a 5th. Then you get Wendell Carter Jr., Mo Wagner, Mo Bamba, Robin Lopez. They only have 10 guys, right? So it's a situation, or Brazitkas, I forgot. So they have 11 guys, but it's a situation where you have to project like kind of a tighter rotation naturally, but it's scary because they're really bad and they can get blown out any given night, and the minutes variance is going to be really, really high. So from a DFS perspective, with those situations when they pop up on big slates, I would consider like maxing one of Orlando guys tonight. It's stuff we'll talk about more on the DFS show. But they are really thin, and there will be opportunities for a lot of minutes tonight, albeit in a bad matchup against the Knicks.
Yeah, and I'll add that Jamal Mosley said that Gary Harris's injury isn't serious, but like you can't play Gary Harris at 99.9% health, especially when you're trying to trade him. So I just put him on IR. Yeah, it's so thin. I don't like the matchup for Suggs today. We'll talk more about that later, but they want to get the ball inside more. They had a lot of paint touches, so getting the ball inside to Wendell Carter Jr.
We have an over on Suggs props that we sent out earlier that I'm sure the line has been destroyed by now, but 18.5 points, rebounds, and assists combined for Suggs is a really light number. We have an under on Franz Wagner, who the line for him was 16.5. And the idea that those two players, in terms of their player types, could be that close in terms of a PRA line was really, really surprising. So I will be, despite the bad matchup, I will be rooting heavily alongside our subscribers for Jalen Suggs tonight. Franz Wagner should have a good opportunity for a lot of minutes, but everything I've seen from him at the professional level so far in the preseason and in game 1, he is like a corner stander, not going to use a lot of possessions right now. I think it's going to take him. He plays very differently than his brother. His brother plays recklessly aggressive. Franz is like more controlled and kind of passive. And so I think it's going to take him, maybe half a season or so to get his feet wet and get his confidence going, to maybe use more possessions. So, any other notes you want to tackle before we get out of here, Mike?
No, I think we hit it. We did just want to mention Thaddeus Young was a DNP-CD in the last game, and Pop talked. This is not an injury, but that could really open up Devin Vassell, who's I think he's pretty cheap today too. So that's really good for Keldon if Thad's out of the picture. And Pirtle.
Yeah, those veteran players that get traded to teams to like make salaries work and stuff. Sometimes you see weird stuff during the course of the season. We know Al Horford in Oklahoma City. a few years ago, just because the teams don't want to risk these guys because they want to be able to move them for something down the road. So we'll see what as that situation develops over time. Thaddeus Young, one of the most durable players in the NBA during his career. So would be disappointing not to have him out there, but was not out there in game one. So that'll do it.
Magic today.
Yeah, that'll do it for us. For the first week of Established Run NBA Injury Report Analysis shows, we will be back again on Monday at 2 p.m. Eastern. And reminder, if you like the free content that we're giving out here and you want to support the show, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. We're continuing to try to grow this channel and provide good content for you guys on it. The more subscribers we have to it, the more interest we have in it, the more we can funnel resources into providing that type of content. Also, if you are not a subscriber to our in-season DFS package, the shows that we have live 2 hours before lock, Monday through Friday. Once again, Mike and I will be on the show tonight at 5 o'clock. Last night it was myself and Gary Hartman. Gary Hartman gave away the nuts with the Paul George flag plant last night. And Gary ended up taking home second in the splash. So shout out to him. Shout out to us. Join us alongside for the ride this NBA season by getting that in-season NBA DFS package. But for us, that'll do it. We'll see you guys next week. Best of luck in all your games this weekend.